Hey, good people. Panashe Sean Marime here, also officially known as Cupid, the King of Hearts. I'd like to thank you for taking time to engross yourself in other people's lives and getting to know what some of us go through. Personally, as for me, I'm a visually impaired young man, a psychology graduate, as well as a musician. Now, allow me to put things into context. I was born like any other child, went to school, high school, went to varsity in South Africa. I was outstanding in a lot of activities, multiple leadership roles. I was outgoing, um, ever present on the sporting fields, doing numerous disciplines, from tennis, cricket, rugby, you name it. So I was studying a double major at a certain varsity in South Africa. Communications and media and business management, to be more precise. Now, as I was approaching my final year, we went to sit for our examinations. During this examination period, for some reason, I started to have a mind-splitting, head-boggling headache that rocked me to my core. I wrote my examinations while being double-sighted, where a question paper and an answer sheet would seem like four scripts when they were only two. I actually had to hold the paper I was writing to know which one I was answering on. The other was a mirage. It took me by surprise, so much so that I didn't even raise the matter. I tried multiple painkillers to no avail, so I flew back home. And a couple of days later, to be more precise, 2 nights later, I complained and I was feverish. I went to visit the hospital. Um, During my checkup, they noticed my temperature had skyrocketed and they called for an immediate um, what do you call this? Admission. So I was admitted. The pain got worse. 2 days later, one morning, a nurse taps my knee and states, Sean, wake up, it's time for breakfast. I open my eyes to a pitch black room, wide-eyed. I stare and try to locate where the sound was coming from. Nurses wear white, of course, but I couldn't see anything. Panic gripped me. I tried to wave my hand in front of my face, and then it struck me. Something was wrong. Then I started panting. I could barely breathe properly. The nurse rushed to call the doctor, who asked me what was wrong, and I said, I can't see anything. He brought a light to my eyes. The Lord knows what that is, whatever apparatus they use. And he shone it into my eyeballs. There was no response. Then he said something's wrong. That's all I recall. That's how I lost my sight overnight. Long story short, after I was discharged rather, from the hospital, and I'd been stabilized with no headache, still with no sight, I tried to go back to the varsity in question. Upon arrival, as I was registering for my final year, I explained the recent occurrences, and they informed me, much to my dismay, that I couldn't continue because they did not have any facilities to cater for my learning, since I was and would be the first student with such a condition on campus. I couldn't believe it, but I got my exam results, and I was awe-stricken to realize that I'd passed all my exams, every single one of them. Amazing, wasn't it? Not quite. The university told me that I was forced to defer, or rather discontinue, until such a time when I had regained my sight, and that had to be within a stipulated period of time, which I then surpassed still at home, because I was at home for 5 idle years, lonely. That's where Cupid was born. The name I mentioned earlier. I recorded a 10-track album available on Soundcloud. If you search for Cupid to the King of Hearts. And at present is receiving national airplay once in a while. It's an R&B and hip hop album. After the 5 years were up, I went for counseling at a rehabilitation center where I was counseled and referred to the University of Zimbabwe. Little did I know that blind people were enrolled in the university. They have a disability resource center on campus, which I attended. It catered for assistive technologies like JAWS, which would aid me in not only reading but also typing assignments and note taking and all that. Now, when I went to the University of Zimbabwe, I couldn't continue with my prior courses, which was a heavy blow in itself. But I was forced to stomach it. As I was applying, they took a glance at my prior studies and noticed I had done psychology. They then offered me two choices on what I could study, whether it was psychology or sociology. I opted for psychology, which had always been a passion. I always wanted to understand the mind. It intrigued me. But this journey was not easy. Reason being, I then became the first visually impaired student to enroll in the psychology department at the University of Zimbabwe, a feat none had taken before, a daring leap of faith. Most of my lecturers didn't know how to cater for my needs. When I mention this, I mean the delivery of lecture material. There were times when we were all treated the same, when I needed further explanation to stay in tune with what was going on. Fortunately, by the grace of the Almighty, I sailed through and recently graduated on the 4th of December 2020 with an honors degree in psychology as the first visually impaired student in psychology to graduate at the University of Zimbabwe. When I tell a lot of people this story, they break down into tears and cry. I have no intention of that at all. I'm reciting this story to motivate you. That whenever you feel inferior, whenever you feel less of yourself, know that out there, somewhere, someone is in a worse state than yourself. I met such people. People who aren't able to walk on 2 feet the way I do. People who don't have two arms like I do. People who can't hear the deaf. That taught me a valuable lesson in life. Appreciate what you have and make the best of it. On top of all that, never, ever give up. I thank you. If anyone would like to get in touch with me, feel free to email me at pnashflash07@gmail.com. That's PNASHFLASH 07 at gmail.com.